I'm going to add to the stream Dan Afsar, who won the first semi-final, and Harry Heath, who won the second. Hello, guys.
Evening, Gareth. How are you?
Oh.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of a little bit surprised because neither of you obviously told me that you'd won. So, so it's very nice to have both of the winners on, and congratulations to the two of you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm just glad I wasn't in Harry's semi-final. It was a lot closer than my one, and looks a very high quality affair. So
yeah,
I think I tactically chose well there.
Harry did have a pretty stacked high quality final, but it's you can never tell how these things are going to go, and I guess we'll come on to it in a minute, but yeah, very high scoring, really entertaining. We've got a few congrats coming through. Claire Barrow, who is also a finalist, as you guys will know. She went through last week. She says, hi guys, well done both. Pam says, well done Harry and Dan. Michael says, nice work, great performances on both specialist and GK rounds. Yeah, you both were superb on both of those. And I'm not surprised this came through from Michael. Good subject choice, Harry, says Michael McPartland, who has also done Father Ted on Mastermind. Yes. So
I was going to say, I'm aware that I'm following the lines of many other good quizzes who have done Father Ted. Yeah.
So that was fantastic. Before we get going, we've got a couple of other messages. Michael has just said nomination for Team of the Week for Frankie and Andrew for winning on Friday. That's a good call. It was a good quiz, really hotly contested. It was a bit of fun, but they did brilliantly, so that's good. Another thing, this is Grace in America. Not even about quizzes, just want to brag that I just got my first vaccine shot. So brilliant, Grace. That's superb to hear. She also says, I love Father Ted, but who doesn't? Yeah, watching it back. How did it feel? Obviously you know how it pans out, but when you're watching it back, do you notice things that you didn't notice at the time?
Yeah, well, I had a few messages from friends on WhatsApp, and they said to me I looked incredibly serious, which I think is just my concentration face, because I'm not, I'm usually very relaxed, but it was a conscious effort to sit the way I sat and to sort of lean forward, bark the answers to the questions, really, because I was so conscious of trying to get through as many questions as possible, particularly in the sort of the current format where the question numbers are far lower than they used to be. So from my first round, I was the first contestant. I was in seat 1 on my first round, and I was horrified to only get 12 questions asked. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I've really done badly here. I've just got such a low score. And then, we hadn't seen any of the other episodes when we recorded the first round, because it was all done back in September. And then even when I got through the general knowledge and my final score was 22, I thought, oh my God, this is such a low score. I've seen Mastermind before. I'm expecting mid to high 20s, even 30s as being winning scores. So when it came to the semi-final, I remember watching back an old final on YouTube, and I think it was the one where, what's the chap's name? The doctor, Gary Grant, is it? Yeah. I remember he sat forward, he barked the answers out, and he got through, I think, 19 points or 18 or 19 points in his specialist subjects, and just as many in his second round. I thought that might subconsciously make Humphreys go faster. So that was why I was leaning forward and barking the answer. That was a deliberate strategy, and it didn't actually work because I got fewer questions in my specialist subject than I did in my first round.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say that I called it, because if you look on Twitter, one of the comments I made on the All Things Quiz Twitter feed was your performance was reminiscent of Gary Grant.
Oh, really?
Literally because you were sat forward, and Claire has said, the chair doesn't lend itself to sitting back, but not just that, but it was that clipped, really quick answering. You were trying to, as you say, trying to get as many questions in as possible, but that was exactly how he did it. And it doesn't surprise me that you kind of picked up a good tactic from him, because it certainly worked for Gary that season. That was the last year that I did it, I think. After seeing him win, I just couldn't cope anymore.
And also, just the other thing on that was I deliberately said surnames only for all of the sort of the answers where it was a person. Just again, if I get a fraction of a second quicker, maybe I'd get an extra question in. So that again was a deliberate tactic.
Talking surnames, Harry, because you were having the perfect specialist subject round until the very final question, where you got the surname correct, and got the first name wrong. Looking back at it now, I mean, it's hard to know how John Humphreys would play it, but are you wishing you'd just given the surname?
Absolutely. It was one of those, I think it was because I heard, the klaxon had gone, and I was like, okay, I think I kind of relaxed a little bit, and I was like, oh, I know this. I know it's that Byrne guy, and I just didn't think it through, and I should have just taken that moment and I've just said the surname. Rookie error, really. I think.
I very nearly did exactly the same as you, Harry. On my last question, on my specialist, it was asking for the name of an athlete, and I said the surname, but his first name, I think he was Finnish, and it was like Vilho, and I didn't know if it was pronounced Vilho or Viljo or Viljo, so I just said the surname, and it was okay. But I very, very nearly did exactly the same as you. I was more relaxed. I know the answer. I'm going to say both names, and I just stopped myself at the last moment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are the perils. I mean, if you can get away with giving surname, then absolutely. But you never quite know with John Humphreys whether you're going to give a surname and he'll go, yes, and here's his full name for you. So it's a little bit of a jeopardy, isn't it? But once that buzzer's gone, and in a way you're a little bit taken out of the zone that you've been in, Harry. I guess that's what kind of happened to you. A little minor brain fart. As it turned out, didn't matter a jot, which was great.
Yeah. But it was one of those things where I was just thinking like, oh, if I tie by a, if that is an important point, then it's always going to plague me. It's going to be one of those things. But luckily, as you say, it didn't in the end.
Michael has put great performance from Harry on Father Ted. Felt it was tougher than my round, as there were questions of directors of the episodes, minor roles, pre-Father Ted careers of writers, and I mean, you will have been aware of that, obviously, as part of your preparation for the final. That was the scope of the quiz. In a way, would you have preferred it to just be the episodes, or did you not really have that kind of option?
To be honest, I quite enjoyed some of the little extra bits of information external to the show, because it was actually because the revision material for it was just basically I got the DVD box set and watched all the episodes, all the special features, which included a comedy connections. I think it was probably an old BBC or Channel 4 show showing, the stars of Father Ted and how they did other things before and afterwards and how they crossed paths and things. So I watched that and made some notes on that, and it was that was kind of one of the things I think I revised in like the last week before the show. One of those sort of last sort of sweeping up any loose ends, and that's how it came. So it just shows that it's sometimes it's right up to the wire with those things that you pick them up.
Yeah, and you can never be quite sure if you've done enough, so you always do that a little bit more just to carry off. How long did you guys have between your first round and your semi-final?
I think it was about a month. So September we recorded the first round, and I think it was mid-October was the semi-finals. Interestingly, they didn't show them in order because I was on the last of 6 semis to be recorded, but for whatever reason, they've shown them in the order they have.
Yeah, I think mine was filmed just before yours, because I met Sally, who was in your semi, whilst preparing for hers, whilst we were going over the results in the restaurant afterwards.
Yeah, it's different to the first round because the initial application process was pre-lockdown, so it was February, March. Then you had, it was supposed to be June that we were recording, and so you had 3 months to prepare, but then because of the restrictions, it got put back from June to September. So you actually had 7 or 8 months to prepare for your first round, and then a month for the semi, and about the same for the final as well.
Yeah.
But you both, I mean, between you, looking at my notes, and my maths is never infallible, but you got 22 out of 23 specialist subject questions between you. In fact, 22 and a half. Well, Harry kind of was almost there with his. You only had a month. how did you nail your subject in such a short period of time? What were your revision and learning techniques?
Well, I guess similar to Harry, it was a subject I knew reasonably well beforehand, so I wasn't going in completely cold. I think if I'm right, Claire, who was on last week, and Claire, I'm sure you'll comment. I think she said she'd started completely fresh with a new subject she didn't know anything about or know much about, with the Russian-Japanese war. But I wanted to go a different way. I wanted to go with something that actually I had a head start on. I knew I was interested in and would enjoy doing the research on. So I think I read 3 biographies, 2 of which I'd read before. But I went through, underlining everything that I thought could be a potential question. And similarly, I looked at archive footage, YouTube, and various sort of old athletics archive material, and transposed all of everything I'd underlined onto a series of A4 sheets. And I think I have 15 sheets of A4 of potential questions, and just read it through, a dozen, maybe 20 times over the course of the last 2 weeks before we recorded. So going in, I was pretty confident that there wasn't any question they could ask me that I didn't know, because I knew that if it was on the sheet, I'd remember it. And I'm very good with statistics and numbers and race details and stuff like that. So I was pretty confident, I don't mind saying, that I would get them all right, and it would have to be something incredibly obscure for me not to know. So I think I chose a subject well and researched it as well as I could have.
And Harry, you had this kind of, on the one hand, the episodes are self-contained. There can't be anything that really goes beyond them. But then you had the life and career. How did you go about, nailing something that perhaps wasn't biographical as Dan's was so much, and actually kind of, anticipating you might get asked about a brand of floor cleaner or whatever it was?
Yeah, it was literally watching each episode with going through them with a fine-tooth comb and sort of pausing it, seeing if there was anything written on screen or things like the floor polish. Because the only thing I was relatively confident I wouldn't need to know is that during the course of Father Ted, Father Jack drinks large amounts of different brands of spirit. And I thought, well, it's on the BBC. They're likely to ask me about Jameson's or any particular brand name. So I was like, okay, won't have to start worrying about in which episode he drinks however many Jeroboams of something. I could count that out. But it was just going through it, writing down in a notepad all the points, then reading over it again and again and again. That was my tactic.
I actually thought that, I don't know if you felt the same, Harry, that when you know a subject really well, you want to be tested on it and you want the questions to be difficult. But actually, I found all 11 questions really easy. They were top level questions where I knew tons of detail behind it. And I was almost disappointed, because of course you want to get them right, but I was disappointed that I wasn't, drilled down to the nth degree. Where I could have told you 20 things about that, and you've just asked me, the headline, if you like. So it's like any quiz. When you go to a quiz and the questions are easy, you're like, well, that's okay. I know the answer, but I want it to be as hard as possible and sort of show off my knowledge, because I've spent so long preparing for it.
It does feel like a bit like you have all this sort of wasted revision, all those things I read and watched, and I didn't even need in the end. It's one of those.
I'll give you an example. So I was thinking about it when I just heard the question again. There was a question about Zatopek's last race win, which was a cross country he did in San Sebastian, and I knew everything about that race. I knew who was in the race, what the times were, what the positions were, what the prizes were. I knew the name of the pub they'd gone to celebrate the win. I knew the name of the landlord of the pub. I knew the name of the dog that the landlord gave to him as a gift. I knew the stations they stopped at on the way home. I knew the name of the family they gave the dog to. And it was just, what city was the race in? And so I know that, but I can tell you a whole chapter on that particular race. Obviously,
but you know what, and I think, judging by the shirt you're wearing and the subject you did, you'd understand when, because I had that very first time I was on Mastermind. I breezed through it, got all my questions right in my specialist subject. I was really disappointed that I didn't feel I'd been pushed, but I think because I'd prepared so thoroughly and gone into absolute mind-numbingly nerdy detail, it was like resistance training, where you're dragging a tire behind you or whatever and trying to run, and actually when you're actually in the competitive environment, and you're freed from that. It actually feels a lot easier. That's what I kind of likened it to. And then, get to the end, and it's like, oh, disappointed. I could have done with another minute of that. Give me some more, throw more at me. And it's just, that's just, I guess that's a mark of great preparation for me.
Yeah, which is why I was, I don't want to bang on about it, but it's why I was disappointed there were only 11 questions, because when you've prepared to answer, n thousand, you want at least 14 or 15 to test your knowledge a bit. So, I did throughout the whole of the Mastermind experience, this series, it was the number of questions that just disappointed me. But going into the second round, I knew that because the questions are slower and longer, if you're behind, then it's so much more difficult to make up a deficit. And that was, that was shown in Harry's episode, where you can't afford to be more than 1 or 2 points behind. And I knew I had to nail my specialist subjects, otherwise it was going to be a really tough show to win.
Yeah. Interesting. Michael's just saying, same approach as you, Harry. Took 3 hours to get through each episode, stopping all the time to make notes on every fine detail. And Claire's kind of agreeing. If I'd written the questions or remember the answers, it is about kind of getting into that short-term memory so that it's there just waiting for you to fish it out, and ideally be able to say at the split second that John Humphreys finishes, so you get it out there, get it correct, move on to the next thing. And you both did that absolutely brilliantly. I felt for, that's probably the wrong word. The two Sallys were both standby contestants, and I think they both actually did remarkably well on their specialist subjects. Bearing in mind, if you guys had won a heat and you knew you were going into the semi-final, they wouldn't have known that and wouldn't have had as much time to prepare, and yet they both still did really well. And having been a standby myself at one point on Mastermind, I know that it's also difficult to gear yourself up to do the level of work you need to when you don't know if you're actually going to be on the show or not. So I think for them, I was impressed by how they did. Did either of them kind of tell you about their story of how they got to be called up?
Yeah, Sally on my heat did. I think she had a week's notice, and she's a doctor as well. So she was saying that she was incredibly busy at work. It was right in the heart of the worst of the pandemic back in October. So she had basically a week to prepare. She wasn't sure if she could even get the time off to do it because of the nature of her job. So yeah, she did tremendously well on such a short lead time.
That's absolutely incredible. Yeah.
When I met your Sally in the hotel, she was also she not only had she had very little time to prepare, but I think she didn't know whether or not she would be on the show until she was in Belfast for the filming. That I think I can't quite remember, so I might be wrong here, but I think in my show, the Sally in my show, she had a little bit more notice that she was likely going to be called up, and she was in the very first episode that aired, which was the one with the 3-way tie, and it was one of the other people who was in that tie that couldn't come back. So I think she had a bit more notice, but still very little time to prepare.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible to say. I don't think people were watching at home quite aware the amount of work you have to do to nail a subject like this, or to think what Sally on David Niven got 9 points, the other Sally got 7 out of 10 on Powell and Pressburger. You've got to watch those films, you've got to put in that time, and to be able to get those answers is fantastic, and to be able to do that on limited notice is kudos. I expect both of those to be back at some point in the future and doing really well, because they've clearly shown that they've got it in them. So good luck to them next time that they're on. Just somebody's put a question in here. Hazel, who is also in the final, can't remember who said Dixon or Doc Green, and Humphreys followed up with correct George Dixon. Was that you, Dan? I can't remember.
That was in Harry's.
That was in Harry's. Because it was
Ashton, I think.
Yeah, it was one of, I think that was one of Ashton's questions, and because it was.
That's it.
I think that's one of the ones where they'd gone back and sort of re-looped it a bit, because I think at the time, John Humphreys just said George Dixon, and so it was slightly unclear whether he'd accepted Dixon of Dot Green as the answer or not. So afterwards, I was talking to Ashton, like, did you not get that one right? Because that would be harsh if he didn't give it to you. But I think they cleared it up a little bit in the edit.
Okay, so it might have been a pickup, a re-record by John Humphreys afterwards, where he does that kind of repeat back at you. One that I was unclear on, Dan, when you were asked to repeat an answer, was that one where he didn't hear it properly, or whether you didn't say it distinctly enough? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just a practicality. I think my mouth was really dry. I said I knew the answer immediately. It was Haluza, which is Haluza, and I think I just said Haluza, and he didn't quite hear it, and I just said it again exactly the same, and he accepted it second time. But again, there was a slight annoyance that you've wasted 2 or 3 seconds, which could be the difference between the next question. But one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't affect you in the end, did it? 4-point victory over Steve, and yours, Harry, was 2 points in the end, wasn't it? Which you came out with a couple of answers towards the end, which I mean, there were some excellent answers. The AAA one from Ashton, which kind of got him a share of 22, but you come out with Turnip for Turnip Townsend and Lutchens. Were they guesses, or were they things that you just fished from the dark recesses of your brain?
The turnip one especially was I was speaking to this to Tim and Ashton afterwards, because when we were talking about it, I was like, that one went back to I'd say when I was in school in about year 6, so when I was probably about 11 or 12, and we were doing the Industrial Revolution. I remembered that for crop rotation they introduced turnips to put nutrients back into the soil. And so I knew nothing about that politician or anything in the details of the story, but he said a vegetable that was in crop rotation, have a guess at turnip, and that was and that's how it came through. So it's one of those things that you never know where these bits are going to just come from. That never crossed my mind since that lesson, probably. And and so that was a big help.
And it was critical, actually, was it? Sorry, carry on. Yeah.
And I was going to say for Lutchens, it was just a case of, it's one of those bits in quizzing that, if it's a first half of the 20th century English architect, I normally just plump for Lutchens.
Which is good to have those go-to answers, kind of the mark of a quizzer. I think because partway through your round, you passed. So there was every danger before you got Turnip that pass could see you tied on 22 points, 3-way tie, but not in the tiebreaker because of the pass. Interestingly, and we talked about it before on the stream, Dan said in his kind of post-episode chat was saying, my tactics were to go quick and don't pass. You passed there. Was that one of those things where it was like
mind completely
unclear? Sorry?
Yeah. It was a mind being completely blank and just wanting to. I'll just move. It's always the case. Even when I'm watching Mastermind at home, for some reason, my brain, when it's one of those questions about what phrase in French means such and such, one of the ones where you have to just do a bit of translation, my brain suddenly freezes. And even though watching it back, I was like, oh, well, of course it's de rigueur. It's really obvious that that's the case. But in the moment, it was just like I forgot all semblance of French in my brain. Just like, I have no idea. I've just passed.
People don't often appreciate it when they're watching, but when you've made a tactical decision not to pass, you're actually still thinking of what can I say as a reasonable answer. You don't want to say something stupid. You want to say something that might possibly be related to the question. So you are still thinking of it, even when you've committed to. I'm not going to get it right, but I still want to say something. So your mind's still going over. So there isn't a break in. Even though you don't get the answer right, there's no break in the series of questions.
Yeah, I had one of those with watching it back. I remembered the one which is about the locomotion, and it was about sort of someone who was a hit in like the 50s or 60s.
We all thought Kylie.
Well, I was like, I'll just say, I know it's definitely not right, but at least it's someone who did the locomotion. I mean, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it is one of those things, I think, where tactically, if you can just get an answer out quickly and you can get an answer quickly and move on, there's no faff. I think to your point, Dan, I've been in a situation where like about a third of the way through a question, I thought, I don't know this. I haven't got a clue. I'm trying to think up a plausible wrong answer. I give the plausible wrong answer only to realise there was a bit at the end of the question which I actually should have therefore known the answer based on, and my plausible answer has turned out to be stupid. My key thing being that I turned Belize into an island at one point when the question was actually about.
And you don't realise it when you're watching that your mind is going at 100 miles an hour. So that there were a couple of questions I got wrong that I was kicking myself over. One, I think he described the Greek for the word eulogy. And I've got a classics degree and I know my Greek and I knew the word eulogy, but my tactic of getting the answer out so quickly, my mouth was ahead of my brain and I said elegy. And I knew it was eulogy. And then similar with the question on how many stars are there on the European flag, I was sitting there thinking, oh, that's easy. We've been looking at European flags for 4 years. I know it's 12. And I was just about to say it and I thought, oh, hang on, or is it 14? And then I did the worst panic thing possible. I plumped for the number in the middle and said 13, which was clearly going to be wrong, rather than going for the one either side that could have been right. So that was just part of my tactic of trying to go as fast as possible. Whereas if it was a pub quiz and I'd sat back for 2 or 3 seconds, I'd have got the right answer on both. But luckily it didn't cost me.
It's a common situation, and usually not a good tactic to change your mind. If something's come to mind, it's come for a reason, but it's really hard in that moment because you don't want to then think, well, I thought of the right answer but didn't say it, so you kind of torn. There was one that you said you came up with, which again was another one where your brain is making connections, or at least this is how I read it, and it didn't quite connect, where it was the Marcel Duchamp one, and clearly you had that kind of Marcel name in your head but came out with Marceau. It felt like it was kind of that's how it felt to me. Instead of Marcel Duchamp, Marcel Marceau. Would that be a fair reflection? It was just one of these brain connection things, put something out there.
Was that me or was that Harry? I can't remember.
Oh, I thought I got that down as you.
Was it me? Yeah. Do you know? I can barely remember.
Then it was the urinal question.
Yes. Now I remember. I didn't actually remember that until I just saw it just now. But you're right. It was in my mind. I knew it was something like that, and I just couldn't get the synapses in the brain to get out the right answer. But if it was a pub quiz, I'd have sat there for 10 seconds and it would have come. But that was just part of it.
The great thing was it didn't throw you, and I think that's what kind of marked out you two and some of the other players we saw tonight. Was wrong answers didn't throw you. You stuck to the game plan. You carried on. You didn't let one answer become 2, become 3, become 4 wrong answers. You managed to get back on track. And again, that sort of coolness under pressure is really interesting. Really kind of critical. And pressure was a word that you mentioned, Dan. And I mean, both of you, did you feel pressure? I mean, having won a first round, in a way, there's nothing to prove, is there? But when you get to the semi-final, did you feel there was pressure on you to try and go one better, to try and get to the final?
No, I don't think I did, to be honest. I said in the daft post-match interview the makers do that, the pressure's gone off. But actually going into it, because I was sat in seat 4 and I watched the other 3 go first, and I think Steve got a couple wrong, and the 2 ladies, Jackie and Sally, I think both got 7 points. And I was so confident I knew my subject inside out. I was actually relaxed before I got out of my chair because I thought, there's a real opportunity here to get a lead. And then obviously I managed to get into the lead, and I thought at halfway that it was realistically, I thought it was probably down to 2 of us, because with the 2 ladies being 4 points behind, the questions are taking about 10 seconds each, and that's 40 seconds or 35 to 40 seconds just to draw level, which is a huge amount of time to give up. So I did, if I'm honest, think it was about probably between the 2 of us, unless there was a storming round from one of the ladies. And then when Steve set a total of 20, I wasn't intimidated by that. Whereas I may have been if it was 23, 24, it might have panicked me into a couple of wrong answers, because I knew that in my first round I'd got a dozen questions right. And I'd say my par score should be around 12, 13. So I actually felt pretty comfortable throughout, if I'm honest. I didn't feel under massive pressure.
Harry, how about you?
I felt under a bit more pressure. I think one of the things which in hindsight was quite useful is that since doing the semi-final, I've crossed paths with Tim and Ashton, and particularly doing other quizzes, and I now know sort of what brilliant quizzes that they are, and you know the sort of the what they bring to it. But at the time, I didn't know anyone, so I was like, okay, I don't know how good these guys are going to be. Just go with it, see how it goes, and it unfolded relatively similarly to my my first round, because I think I was in the same seat before, and I was leading after the first round, and once I had the lead after the first round, I was like, okay, then I could relax a little bit in the second. So yeah, it was kind of very similar to the first time around, really.
Yeah, incredibly tight. There was one thing, a comment somebody put on Twitter about, and we talked about your tactics, Dan, of kind of hurrying Humphries and being on the edge of the chair and whatever. And he said, when you talked about pressure, he said you were putting Humphries under pressure. And I do think there's there's something in that kind of, if you're quick, he responds kind of thing to you. Yeah, that certainly was a good comment on Twitter. I thought it was appropriate. We've got a few more comments that have come up related to various things we said. So about go-to answers, Michael McPartland said, to paraphrase one thing Pat Gibson once said to me, good to have a go-to Jesuit. So that's the go-to architect. It's always good to have your go-tos. Hazel, who say is in the final, said she met Sally from the first semi, and she'd hardly had any time to prepare. Thinks she did really well and shouldn't feel bad about herself. I don't think anybody, if you're in a semi-final of Mastermind, should feel bad about your result. You've done amazingly to get there. The task of getting from first round to preparing a semi-final, in a short amount of time, that is tough at the best of times. In COVID, pretty darn difficult. So no, I don't think anybody can feel anything other than pride after tonight. They all did themselves justice.
Yeah, and the other weird coincidences, of course, is that both of the Sallys had overlap between their topics.
Yes,
being Dave Niven and Powell and Pressburger, because it was quite funny because she mentioned, when I was speaking to Sally afterwards, she mentioned her topic, and I was like, oh well, we had a few questions that were sort of around Powell and Pressburger, and so I told her that she wasn't likely to get Trubshaw as an answer because it's already been in one semi, so that was a strange coincidence.
That was an interesting crossover. It's funny that the way your kind of head does things to you, because we got this comment from Claire. I was in a weird situation where I'd been placed in seat 4, and that said to me that I was expected to win, so I relaxed completely. I may have this completely wrong. I kind of think you probably have, Claire, but I do think you get into a situation sometimes where you start reading things in of, or I did, of a particular, like, members of the production team seem particularly friendly. It's like, do they like me? Am I gonna get a favour? I certainly didn't think where I was seated was kind of a pro or a con necessarily in terms of their choice. And I know being early didn't work out for me in one of them because Humphries sped up over the course of the round. But did you kind of find yourselves second guessing that sort of thing, or was it not really kind of a factor in your thought process?
No, not so much for me. I was in seat 1 for my first round, which I quite liked because I thought I can go and put down a marker, put down a good score, and hopefully intimidate everyone else. And then, I've just explained being in seat 4 actually took the pressure off him as well. So I don't think it really matters so much. What I think is different for our series than any other series was that I hadn't met any of the other contestants or contenders before because we didn't mix. Because of the restrictions, we went to our hotels. We had to eat separately. We were in our rooms most of the time. There's no green room, so we didn't have a chance to talk to each other what we'd done in the previous rounds, what scores we'd got. Whereas if I'd been in a room and everyone said, "Oh yeah, I got 28 in my first round," and it was a piece of cake, and I'm going to blitz this one. You could perhaps get intimidated by everyone else and try and second guess their subjects and all the other quizzes they've done and so on. But I literally didn't know who was in my semi-final until we got into the studio. And at that point, I think I'd only seen, maybe I'd seen one of them. I think it was Jackie, because she did cheeses in her first round. And I'd remembered that. But going in, I think when we did the recordings, we were in about week 8 of the going out, and the only person I really remembered as setting an intimidating first round score was Frankie Fanco, and I remember thinking, well, I hope I'm not in the same semi as her because I know that she's good, only because I didn't know anyone else. And she obviously wasn't in semi, but I didn't know anybody literally until we sat down in the chairs.
Interesting. Harry, how about you? I mean, you got a little bit more of a track record in sort of the quiz circuit going in. Were you aware of any potential opponents?
The exact same as Dan in seeing the Frankie's heat by that stage and saying, okay, well, you know, she's going to go far in all likelihood. I don't want to be in the same semi as she was. Yeah, I again, it was kind of, it's one of the things where I think it contrasts with your previous chats with contestants on Only Connect and University Challenge, who, although had limited potential to mix, at least did have a bit of time in the green room where they could kind of, in their own sort of little corners, sort of speak to each other and stuff. Whereas our interactions were purely if we were in the hotel restaurant at the same time and calling across tables just to see where people were. So we didn't have a huge amount of time to mix. Although in some cases, I feel like I've spoken to people more since then than we were ever able to do on while we were in the same room.
I mean, yeah, a weird and almost artificial experience, but kind of unique. You know, hopefully, the next batch to record will have perhaps a little bit more kind of freedom to interact. But nonetheless, you know, we were saying about Only Connect, we were saying about University Challenge. I think the fact that they managed to put this series out and that contestants like yourselves of high quality took part has played, you know, quite a big role in keeping morale up, some normality to kind of peg our lives to get, you know, through the last God knows how many months. It feels like forever that these 3 series have been going on. But I do think, you know, kudos to the production team, but also to contestants who are prepared in the middle of a pandemic to fly to Belfast and, you know, trust that people were going to look after them. So,
I mean, yeah, I was very close to not being able to make it at all, because if you remember back in the summer, I was in France and I'd gone over for a holiday, and then they changed the rules on when you could, how long you had to self-isolate when you came back, and it was given. Don't know if you remember, but you've got 24 hours to get back to the UK. Otherwise, you've got to self-isolate for 14 days. And so me and about 2 million Brits were trying to get back across the channel, and they phoned me because they knew I was on holiday as I was racing up towards the Eurotunnel, and said, "Are you going to be back in the UK by tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, I should be back in a few hours." But it was, you know, it was touch and go as to whether I was going to be able to get across before the sort of midnight deadline, and I made it by about 3 hours. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to take part at all, because I'd have had to self-isolate and I wouldn't have been able to go to Belfast. Was
it the first attempt at Mastermind for both of you, or have you recidivists?
Go on, Harry.
I was going to say, yeah, my very first time, my first application, and I sort of applied just at the end of sort of probably January 2020, and then sort of heard back a few months later. So yeah, it was my first attempt. So I didn't realize until speaking to one of the production people after my first round exactly how many people do apply. You don't get a sense of it when you're sort of watching it, but it's thousands of people apply every year that they have to get through. And I can only imagine that it must take them sort of weeks to go through all the different applications and try and find people. But yeah, I'm lucky to get on first attempt.
Yeah, it's sort of not the first time for me, because some people might remember, but in 2008, so 12 and a half years ago, there was a one-off series of sports-themed Mastermind.
Oh yes,
and it was hosted by Des Lynam, who was right at the end of his broadcasting career. He was struggling a bit by then, but they did 9 episodes of that and I was on the first episode of that, and that was up in Manchester. So it was a sports themed specialist subject, and then sports questions, general knowledge sports questions. And I did win my episode, but it was a weird series that they did 9 episodes, and the 6 highest winning scores went to the final.
Right.
So I won the first one, but then I sort of slipped down the leaderboard each week and finished 7th. So I didn't get to the final. But so I have sat in the black chair, but not in the sort of the regular version. But I only applied to go on it because I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire last year and failed. And it was on in May of last year. So we recorded it the previous December, so December 2019. It went out in May of 2020, and I got the £32,000 question wrong, and as well as like the horror of losing the money and the opportunity to win more money. The thing that bothered me most was that I thought I wanted to come across as a good quizzer, and I wanted to get some quiz credibility back. So it was within a few weeks of the Mastermind record, of the Millionaire recording, that I applied to go on Mastermind to get some credibility back, and hopefully getting through to the final shows that actually I'm a reasonable quizzer, and that wrong question on Millionaire was an aberration. Still wants me though.
You certainly shown that. Will has asked a question, and I think we know what the answer is, but was it coincidence they showed an episode with a round on Liberal Democrats after the death of Baroness Williams, in fact, who was an answer? And the answer is yes, it's coincidence, because your semi-final has been scheduled for a good while, hasn't it? So they didn't twist the schedules around to kind of make that happen. It was just a coincidence.
Yeah. But it was an interesting one, because you felt like something like that was going to happen, because they introduced the show by saying, here's the Mastermind semi-finals, which were recorded earlier this year. I was like, okay, something's going to change.
Yeah, no, they weren't.
But one thing, they weren't filmed earlier this year, they were filmed last year. But
yeah, indeed. I'm interested. I thought that there was an interesting set of subjects tonight. So across the 8 subjects, I'll run through them. Lib Dems, Powell and Pressburger, the Bauhaus movement, Emil Zatopek, REM, David Niven, Father Ted, John Wesley. If you couldn't have done your subject, what one of the others might you have thought, okay, I can tackle that one?
From my one, I remember getting a couple of Steve's Liberal Democrat questions correct, because a sort of general knowledge would get you a couple of those. I think Steve he's a Lib Dem councillor, whatever's between a councillor and an MP. I think that's what he is. So it was a subject that he obviously knew well. I was speaking to Sally, and she told me beforehand, she'd said that she was doing Powell and Pressburger as we went to the studio. I nodded. Oh yeah, that's interesting. I knew literally nothing about Powell and Pressburger, and the Bauhaus movement. I could roughly tell you what it is, but I wouldn't have known anything. And from Harry's lot, I don't know. David Niven, I think, was quite an interesting one. I think all of them, I maybe got one without any revision. If I'd put in the revision, who knows?
Yeah. Harry, any take your fancy?
Yeah, well, my first round I did a director and their movie, so Powell and Pressburger really did appeal to me, because I was like, because I watched quite a number of them during lockdown, so I was very enthusiastic about it when I heard that she was doing it. I was like, so many good questions they could do. So that would probably be one of them. And actually, it was one of the things when I was watching, literally a few weeks before doing Mastermind, I was reading about Zatopek, and I was like, this would be a really interesting topic to do on Mastermind. But I didn't put it down my list because I was put off by having to learn lots of Czech surnames, and I was like, that's going from a very low point of knowledge. That would be impossible to learn all those names. So I ruled it out pretty quickly, but I thought it was interesting, and then I was pleasantly surprised when I heard that Dan was doing Zatopek.
There is a guy who's on next week's semi-final who's doing the Grand National. So I was chatting to him just before we went in, and I'd happily sit down without any revision and do the Grand National. I think I could do pretty well on that. I like my horse racing, although I didn't win anything this weekend.
I feel like I do a few. I did. I got the winner.
I came third.
I would have done all right on Grand National since about the year 2000, I think, but I wouldn't be able to do the history of the race.
Yeah.
And interesting. My subjects were. I think I submitted 13 subjects in the end for as potential subjects, and Zatopek wasn't in my first 5. But I think the first 5 on my application form, they rejected all of them. They said they wanted me to come on the show, but I had to choose another 5 set of subjects. So and then another 3 before I got to the final one for the final.
What sort of ones were rejected?
There was a couple of sport ones. I did a sport one in my first round, the London 2012 Olympics. I think my first choice was the World Darts Championships, and I've got a dartboard sticking out my head, so you can tell I'm a darts fan. I think I asked for maybe a couple of TV ones that were rejected. Blackadder, which I know is popular, but someone did it this series. The Thick of It, which I enjoy. I think I asked for Mount Everest, the history of Mount Everest. That was rejected. And the one that I had that was sort of stuck with my last choice, just because I needed to fill in the 5th box. And I said London's Royal Parks, because I live sort of near Richmond Park. And I don't really know anything about the parks other than what they are, but I don't know anything of the history or the detailed geography and so on. So I kept sort of trying to push back against it, saying, I know I've put it down, but I don't really want to do it. I would, for every round, I kept saying, can I sort of deselect that one? Because I think it would have been 8 Royal Parks with a massive, 500-year history would have been perhaps a bit too broad. But yeah, it was. It's so important to choose your specialist subject correctly, because we've seen it through the series. Some people have picked stuff they enjoy, but it can be so broad and the questions can go off in so many directions that it's really hard to nail down the limited amount of knowledge. So my advice to anyone going on Mastermind is really, really think about your specialist subjects, and one that you're going to enjoy learning, because it shouldn't feel like homework. If it feels like work and you're not enjoying it, you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. But you can't really afford to be too far behind in Mastermind these days. It might change in the new era, but if you're more than a few points behind, you're going to struggle. So you've really got to know your specialist subject.
Harry, were there any you had rejected?
Oh yeah, quite a lot. In fact, I was really surprised that they went for Father Ted, because only after I put it on my list did I look it up and realised that it was apparently on a banned list of ones that they didn't want people to go anymore, especially since Michael had done it and Pat had done it in the final before. I put it really low down on my list simply because I thought it was a non-starter. I said, oh, these are some topics I'd like to do. I kind of said, well, I've done films in the first round, so I guess you probably don't want me to do more pop culture in the second round. But if you were open to it, then here's a few TV series I feel like I could answer questions. And Father Ted was one of those, and that's what they went for. So, but yeah, they didn't go for. Well, initially I put there's quite a few I tried to push forward. Angela Merkel was the notable one, because I know very few guys seem to do famous women as their specialist topic. I was like, I could try and set the balance a little bit another way, but I think she's too current. And there was a few other TV series which might have just been a bit too obscure, because I suppose they want TV series that everyone's seen and have a chance of getting them.
Gerard Mackay has put, I'd be afraid of spoiling Father Ted by studying it in detail. And Michael said, don't worry, I started to enjoy it again 5 years after doing it. Did you find, Dan, you said it's important to have something that you kind of enjoy, etc. But did you find that the process of deconstructing it and kind of learning it and turning it into kind of bite-sized knowledge has affected your kind of enjoyment of it in any way, or has it enhanced it?
For me, I felt like actually, because one thing that they cut out of the end interview was probably a good thing, because it would probably have made some people angry if they wanted to do Father Ted, is that I hadn't actually seen all the episodes before I picked it as my topic. I knew it well enough that I knew I'd enjoy rewatching everything and going through it, but I wasn't a massive diehard fan or anything. Like I'd never seen the one with where the Nazi one, or the one where they sell.
You're a racist, Father Ted. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I should have. It was a bit of a blind spot, but it was quite nice for, in some cases, almost watching it like it was the first time. And actually, with Father Ted, unlike Michael, I found that I felt like I could watch it again straight after the show. That was my big fear. Going, if I went to something that I really loved, would I start to hate it? So I went with something I quite liked, and so that if it turned into a horror show, I wouldn't miss it too much. But yeah, I watched a few episodes the following weekend after the semi-final, and it still makes me laugh, even though I've deconstructed it into individual elements, and I know the origins of all the different jokes and the backstories and everything.
Dan, has there been any impact on your?
No, not at all. I mean, I don't think it's any great surprise that I'm a big sports fan, and I was actually quite surprised they let me do a sporty one for both first round and semi. Not for the final though. But no, the first one round, the Olympics. You know, I just enjoyed watching all the old footage back and reading in detail. I mean, going into like who won the 25-meter small bore pistol shooting and learning all the medalists' names from South Korea, that was a bit painful. And learn the dressage moves and the rest. So perhaps that got a bit tiresome. But no, Zatopek, it's someone who fascinated me for years, and it's just been a pleasure to do the research, which is why I said, you should choose a subject. Well, I think you should choose a subject that you enjoy, because you're going to spend such a long time working on it. And if it's something that you don't enjoy, it just becomes like homework. And if you're doing a program that you're not enjoying the process, then is it really worth doing? I don't know. Not for me though. It has to be something.
One thing I would add is I think doing a person is a really good topic to do, because it's also quite interesting, especially if you know a bit about them and you're kind of interested in them. Like, I'm not the kind of person who sort of hero worships or anything, because there's that Matthew Paris program on Radio 4 where it's kind of like Great Lives, and I never thought there's no one I know in that much depth to do it. But I think doing something like Mastermind and really sort of going into the depths of someone's life, and you really kind of get to know the contradictions in their character. You know them almost better than people that you know in real life. And so I recommend that for anyone who's thinking of what topics to do. It's an interesting experience.
Yeah, good comments there. I mean, I've done biographies, and of course, when we're talking about having defined parameters, born, died, and then you're covering all the stuff in between. But it kind of does rather allow you to know when you've covered everything. Just a few more comments about things that were rejected. Claire's saying history of the Tour de France and Gilbert and Sullivan were rejected. Gerard's saying about Pat Gibson wanted to do Ideal with Johnny Vegas as a drug dealer, but that was rejected. I suspect that's the BBC playing safe and avoiding the Daily Mail. And Michael is just saying, I'm still going to be annoyed if anyone gets a WWE subject before me. Well, there you go, Michael. That's you've got to get in there. He loves his WWE. Pam, on the other hand, loves her athletics, and didn't do as well on London 2012 as I expected, and I was there for a lot. I think Pam did a lot of stewarding and stuff like that at London 2012. So no, Pam absolutely loves her athletics, but it really is that kind of different level of when you're studying for Mastermind, you've got to take it above and beyond kind of the good knowledge. You've got to try and make it really, really great knowledge, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Pam. Athletics is my big thing, and I like to think that I know as much about athletics as anyone. And still, on my first round, there was an athletics question from London 2012, and I was in the stadium at the time. I didn't get it. It was the name of a first leg semi-finalist relay runner. I didn't get.
Oh. Yes, I remember that question. Yeah,
I was in the stadium at the time, and I didn't even get it. Yeah.
Pam was a games maker, so yeah, too many sports to know it all. So these are the semi-finals out of the way. Dare I ask, are you allowed to say what your final topics are?
I think we're allowed to. Yeah.
I don't. Well, actually, I'm not sure if we are. We can probably strongly hint, but they haven't listed it on the BBC website what all the topics are yet, so I don't know.
Well, I think that's because they haven't got all the semis out of the way yet, so they can't reveal next week's people, can they? Yeah.
Well, I don't mind giving you a hint. Mine's about a famous explorer.
Okay, famous explorer. Interesting. Harry, go on, give us a clue. We'll make it like 3, 2, 1, and we can try and piece it all together.
I've also gone for a person, and I think that often what's advised with Mastermind is to go for someone who had a relatively short life, so there's less to revise. I went the opposite angle and gone for someone who's currently in his 90s. So there's a long life.
Well, we'll really look out for who those are in presumably what, a couple of weeks' time. Next week, semi-finals, week after the final.
Yeah.
So we'll look out for that, and maybe if you're around, depends. If one of you wins and you're drunkenly carousing with friends and family, you might not want to. But if you are such a mind, it'd be great to have you guys back on.
To speak now, and I don't know if anyone's going to have been watching me and Harry tonight, because they're all in the pub.
We've had a few, and people will be watching on catch up anyway. But well, congratulations, both of you. It was really entertaining tonight. You both put in extremely good performances, which mean that you've got to be taken very, very seriously for the grand final. There's really not very much more to say, really, because it was just great entertainment. Particularly Harry fighting off a really very stiff challenge from Tim and Ashton, but nonetheless, Dan, you absolutely nailed your specialist subject, put in a killer general knowledge round, 2 brilliant performances. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on the stream tonight. Really, really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having us, and yeah, it'd be great to come back on after the final.
Cool. So that's it for Quizzy Monday for tonight. Again, thanks to Dan and Harry. Thanks to everybody who's watched. So we'll look out for you guys in a couple of weeks' time. Next week we've got another set of semi-finals. We'll see what happens there. I know we've got some tough competitors in that. We've got Frankie Fanco, we've got Jonathan Gibson. They're just ones that come to mind. I'm sure there are other cracking contestants. So that promises to be another great week of Mastermind, and we will be here next week on Quizzy Monday to chat about it all, and of course the grand final in a fortnight's time. Look out for stuff on All Things Quiz in the coming week. We will have more videos coming up. We'll have Quiz Week on Thursday. We will have, if this is the answer, what is the question, going for a vote. I know, trying to get it right way around. Over the course of this week, the answer at the moment is coat. So we'll be putting that to the vote over the course of the week, and we'll have our lunchtime quiz time on Twitter every lunchtime. But until Thursday, when we're back with Quiz Week, have a great week, and we'll see you hopefully next week on Quizzy Monday. So goodbye.